He gave his last chocolate to a starving alien girl. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a tomb of rust-colored sand beneath an alien sky. Marcus had crashed here 3 days ago when his supply shuttle malfunctioned over the remote planet Cathus Prime. 3 days of rationing his meager supplies, 3 days of watching the horizon for rescue that hadn't come. His communication array was fried, his beacon drained to barely a whisper. He sat beneath the broken wing of a shuttle, shielding himself from the twin suns that scorched everything in sight. In his trembling hands, he held his last chocolate bar, a small Terran luxury he'd saved for emergencies. The wrapper was faded from the heat, but the bar itself remained intact, protected by its foil covering and his obsessive care. It was meant to be his final morale booster before the rationing became truly desperate, before thirst or hunger claimed him. The sound came suddenly, cutting through the howling wind. A child's cry. Marcus's head snapped up. In all his time on Cathus Prime, he'd seen nothing but rock formations and the occasional silicon-based insect that skittered across the sand. Yet that sound was unmistakably humanoid. A voice, high-pitched and desperate. He struggled to his feet, using the shuttle's hull for support, and peered around the twisted metal. Through the shimmering heat waves, he saw her. A small figure staggered across the dunes, half buried in flowing, sand-colored robes that had torn in several places. Her skin was a pale blue-green, and her large eyes, luminous and green as polished jade, were wide with fear and desperation. She was thin, impossibly thin, as though she hadn't eaten in weeks. Her small frame swayed with each step as she moved toward the wreckage. She hadn't noticed Marcus yet. Instinct warred with caution in his mind. This was an alien world, and he knew nothing of its inhabitants, nothing of their temperament, their needs, their capacity for violence. But watching her stumble and nearly collapse in the sand, Marcus felt something deeper than caution. He recognized desperation. It was the same thing looking back at him from every reflective surface. "Here," he called out, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Here." The girl froze, her head snapping toward him with the speed of a startled animal. For a moment, their eyes met across the expanse of sand and ruin. In that moment, Marcus saw something flicker in her gaze, a mix of hope, fear, and profound hunger. She ran toward him. Her steps were unsteady, and twice she fell, but she kept coming. When she reached the shadow of the shuttle, she collapsed at his feet, her breathing rapid and shallow. Marcus caught her before she tumbled completely, lowering her gently to the sand. She was feather-light, her bones like delicate instruments beneath the layers of fabric. "Water," she whispered in broken English, the word heavily accented but comprehensible. "Please, water." Marcus's heart sank. His water was rationed to a single bottle, and even that was perhaps a day's supply for one person, let alone two. But he didn't hesitate. He retrieved his bottle from the shuttle and carefully poured a small amount into his palm, letting her drink. She gulped it desperately, and he had to stop her before she drank too much too quickly. When she'd recovered slightly, color returning to her delicate features, she looked at him with those enormous, luminous eyes.
"Thank you," she said.
I thought I would die out there." "What's your name?" Marcus asked, sitting beside her in the shade. "Aisha," she replied. I was separated from my caravan. It was attacked by sand raiders. I ran for so long." Her voice broke slightly. "My people, I don't know if they survived." Marcus's chest tightened. This girl, and she was just a girl, perhaps no more than 10 or 11 in equivalent years, had suffered a trauma he couldn't begin to fathom. Yet here she was still breathing, still trying. "You're safe now," he said, knowing it was probably a lie, but saying it anyway. She huddled against the wall of the shuttle, and Marcus realized she was still starving. Her moment of hydration was temporary relief, but her body needed nutrition. His mind raced through calculations. How long could both of them survive on his remaining supplies? The answer was, not long. Marcus reached into his pocket with trembling fingers and withdrew the chocolate bar. Aisha watched him with those wide, curious eyes as he unwrapped it slowly, revealing the rich brown squares beneath. "This is called chocolate," he said. "It's for my world. I was saving it. But I think you need it more than I do right now." He broke off nearly half the bar and extended it toward her. Aisha stared at it as though she'd never seen anything like it before. She took it hesitantly, sniffed it, then placed it in her mouth. Her eyes went impossibly wider, and suddenly tears were streaming down her face. "What is it?" Marcus asked, concerned. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever tasted," she whispered. "It's sweet. Everything here is bitter or harsh. But this tastes like..." She struggled for the word. "Like kindness. It tastes like you cared enough to give me something precious." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He watched her savor each small square, eating slowly despite the hunger that must have been screaming at her to devour everything at once. She shared the moment with him, and he broke off a piece for himself, letting it melt on his tongue as he sat beside this alien child in the desert. They talked through the rest of that day and into the night. Isha told him about Cathis Prime, about the crystalline cities on the other side of the continent, about her family, about her role in the kingdom. Marcus found himself not quite believing the scope of what she was describing until she mentioned, almost casually, that her father was the High King. "You're a princess?" Marcus asked, incredulous. Aisha shrugged as though it were irrelevant. "I am the youngest of 7. I was not supposed to matter much." She paused, looking at him intently. "You did not give me your chocolate because of who I am. You gave it to me because I was hungry." "Yes," Marcus said simply. Something flickered in her expression. Gratitude, perhaps, or recognition. The next morning, before the suns had climbed high enough to make movement dangerous, Aisha took Marcus's hand. "Come," she said. "My people will be searching. The wind carries our messages. If we climb that ridge, I can send a signal they will understand." They climbed together, his hand never leaving hers. And true to her word, Aisha produced a small crystalline object from her robes and held it toward the sun. It caught the light and threw prismatic patterns across the sky, a beacon in its own way. 3 hours later, the rescue vehicles arrived. The first thing Marcus saw was the insignia, a royal seal that matched the pattern on Aisha's torn robes. "High King's Guard," the girl explained. They'd been searching for her for 2 days. The soldiers treated Aisha with reverence, wrapping her in fine fabrics and placing her carefully into a climate-controlled vessel. But before they took her away, she turned back to Marcus, who stood small and insignificant beside her. "You saved my life," she said. "On Cathis Prime, such a debt creates a bond. You will always be considered family to me." "All I did was share some chocolate," Marcus replied. "No," Aisha said, her luminous eyes serious. "You shared kindness when you had nothing else. That is worth more than 1,000 chocolates or 1,000 worlds." 6 months later, when Marcus's rescue team finally arrived at Cathis Prime's orbital station, he found a message waiting for him. It was from the High King himself, offering Marcus permanent sanctuary on Cathis Prime, along with resources, land, and more than he could ever need. His daughter had told the whole kingdom about the human who had sacrificed his last comfort to feed a starving child. And humanity's status changed that day, not through conquest or cleverness, but through the simple act of one person's compassion.